The gospel reading is Luke chapter 7, beginning with the 36th verse. One of the Pharisees asked to eat with him, and he went into the Pharisee's house and took place at table. And behold, a woman of the city, who was a sinner, when she learned that he was at table in the Pharisee's house, brought an alabaster flask of ointment, and standing behind him at his feet, weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears, and wiped them with the hair of her head, and kissed his feet, and anointed them with the ointment. Now when the Pharisee who had invited him saw it, he said to himself, "If this man were a prophet, he would have known who and what sort of woman this is who is touching him, for she is a sinner." And Jesus, answering, said to him, "Simon, I have something to say to you." And he answered, "What is it, teacher?" "A certain creditor has two debtors. One owed 500 denarii and the other 50. When they could not pay, he forgave them both. Now which of them will love him more?" Simon answered, "The one, I suppose, to whom he forgave more." And he said to him, "You have judged rightly." Then, turning to the woman, he said to Simon, "Do you see this woman? I entered your house. You gave me no water for my feet, but she has wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You gave me no kiss, but from the time I came in, she has not ceased to kiss my feet. You did not anoint my head with oil, but she has anointed my feet with ointment. Therefore I tell you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. But he who is forgiven little loves little." And he said to her, "Your sins are forgiven." Then those who were at table with him began to say among themselves, "Who is this, who even forgives sins?" And he said to the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
Last Sunday night, segueing into Monday morning in the dark, I had the most marvelous, vivid dream. You ever have one of those dreams when you wake up, the dream seems more real than the world that you've woken up to? It was one of those. And in this dream, there's all this stuff was going on, but the climax of the dream, right before I woke up, came when suddenly my grandmother, Mama Howell, was standing in front of me. She's been gone 50 years. And she was standing in front of me, and she said, "Would you dance with me?" So I reached down and I put an arm around her and took her hand, and she was just a wisp of a person. It may be like the last time I saw her when she was way too young, wasting away from cancer. And we danced, this sort of thing, and I felt like I was holding her up, and the glory of the dream was I kept looking into her face, and she had just the most beautiful, joyful smile as we were dancing. I woke up, it was just glorious. I mentioned it to Lisa, and we started in what people do, like, I wonder why you dreamed that. Sometimes like you could just receive a dream and not have to analyze it. It'd be a happy one to receive. Why did I dream that? I don't know. I know my grandmother, when I was a little kid, when I would stay with her in her sewing room and in her bedroom, she had on the wall these, do you know these Degas prints of these ballerinas? Do you know what I'm talking about? There's these gorgeous, I was a kid. I never thought to ask her, "Mama Howell, why do you love these Degas ballerinas? Did you dream of being a dancer? Were you a ballerina?" We never talked about that. I also, a couple nights before, had read a scene in Niall Williams' wonderful novel, The Time of the Child, that narrates the death of a woman who, she just was a wisp right at the end. It's set in Ireland. The doctor comes by to check on this grandmother, and she has died. Here's what he writes. "Dodie was no longer where she had always been, on her side of the bed. Now she was moved into its center. The two valleys either side of that ancient mattress were apparent, but she was in the ceremonial middle and made no indent, so light was she now. The dead contain their own contradictions. They are gone, but perhaps not so far that they can't hear us. Can they hear us? Can they hear us? I wondered, preparing for the sermon, what would she was a great Bible scholar, reader, very pious, prayerful person. What would she have thought about today's text, which incidentally was marvelously read. John, thank you. Reading, this is the way Duke fans read. It's super well done. The punchline in the text comes when it says, she is a sinner, this woman, she is a sinner. It's so easy for the Pharisee, right? He looks at a woman like this and he goes, she is a sinner. It's so easy for him to put her in a box, to pass judgment on her. He's an accounting ledgers kind of guy, and so many of us live this way. You live your life and you think it's all about merits and demerits. You try to pile up more merits than you have demerits, but there are those, like this Pharisee, they've got a lot of merits. They've been so good. They've done so much good. They might have a couple of demerits, maybe not. I don't know. And then there's a woman like this, and she's just a mountain of demerits. She probably has no merits whatsoever. I heard a great illustration years ago when I was in seminary. I heard this, it was like an old school preacher. When I heard the sermon, I thought, I want to grow up to be like him. It's so good. So he told a story about a kid. He may have been the kid who would go to the little store in town, and on credit, he'd get some gum or he'd get some candy, and he'd come back, he'd get a donut day after day, and the debt on his account kept mounting and mounting until it was just way too much for any kid to manage. And his grandfather learned about it and sneaked down one day and paid off his debt for him. So in the sermon, it's like, that's what God does for us. I thought, oh man, that's so good. Like God, Jesus, he pays my debt for me. I've never used that in a sermon until just now. And I'm not sure that's even right. Sinners need payments, those with demerits. Is that how it works? This Pharisee is so interesting. If you listen to John read it, it said, he said to himself, it's not out loud, he said to himself, if he were a prophet, he would have known she is a sinner. Like, so great. He says it to himself, like, and isn't it, we just do this, right? Isn't it delicious when in your own mind you can find faults with other people and pass judgment on them? I mean, it's just a frenzy of fun, isn't it? Like, and you don't have to look foolish or stupid in front of anybody else. You can just do it in the privacy of your mind. Or maybe you find a like-minded person and you can do it together. It just cements a relationship so well when you can pass judgment on those other guys who are so terrible. We just love this stuff so much, don't we? The Pharisee said to himself, if he were a prophet, he would know that this woman was a sinner. He would know this woman is a sinner. Jesus perceives what he is thinking, not because he's a prophet, because Jesus knows human nature. Jesus knows what these Pharisees are like. They're just real quick to pass judgment on others and very smug about their own goodness. Indeed, Jesus knows people. She is the sinner. What the Pharisee likes to do is he likes to draw a line. We all like to draw a line, and he feels like he can very comfortably draw the line. I'm good, she's a sinner. We draw the line between good and evil. We draw a line between good and evil. We do this all the time. After 9/11, President George Bush came out and said, what I guess a president should say in such a situation. He said, we will rid the world of evil. Robert Bellah, sociologist at Harvard, responded to this by saying, I don't know how we're going to rid the world of evil. I can't rid my own heart of evil. See how we do that? We draw the line like good, evil. It runs through us. Every one of us has the line that runs through us. It's good and evil. We have belief and we have doubt. We have beauty and we have brokenness. That line runs through every single one of us. Jesus turns the tables. Jesus refuses to define this woman as she is a sinner. Instead, he defines her as someone who loves and is loved. It's different, isn't it? And I think Jesus even sees the Pharisee, smug as he may be, as someone who is loved, someone that Jesus loves. Instead of just writing him off, Jesus tries to help the guy. He tells him a story. He tries to move him somewhere. Did you hear the phrase in it? He who has been forgiven much. When I read that, I thought, well, that would be me. That would be you. And that would be this woman. And that would be the Pharisee. It would be all of us. He who has been forgiven much. And what Jesus clarifies is that those who have been forgiven much know how to love. And if you don't believe you've been forgiven much, you don't really know how to love. Isn't that interesting? If you've been forgiven much, you know how to love. If you've not been forgiven much, do you even know how to love? I'd amend that even by saying those who have been forgiven much know how to have mercy on and invite and include others. This Pharisee, he's having a big meal for a bunch of people, and the woman who is a sinner comes in. We could ask the question, why didn't he invite her to dinner? Why didn't he include her? It's probably because he doesn't think he's been forgiven much. Reminds me of Mama Howell. My sister and I would stay with her and Papa Howell for a long time, and she would scrape these meals together. She was a fabulous cook, but they were very poor, so there was never a lot of food. But what we all remember about meals at her table is there was always a crowd, and there's always at last minute a stray person or two, some worker down the street, some cousin who'd pop by, whatever. She was just, come, more. And we'd squeeze in at the table, and sometimes there was no more room to squeeze in at the table. We'd have to set up a little coffee table over here. And then we'd be eating. Oh, you can't take too much because there are a lot of us here. It was glorious. It was glorious. She knew how to love. She knew how to include. Thought of other things that happened when I was with them. One summer we were there, and I guess my grandparents, they were adding a garage onto the end of their little house. And so in the construction process, and I remember in the front yard, there was all this construction stuff, bricks and wood and nails and metal and all this. And Papa Howell repeatedly said, don't go in the front yard. Don't go in the front yard. Well, of course, I immediately went into the front yard, tripped, fell, and a nail was implanted in my knee. I am howling. There is blood everywhere. And Papa Howell comes up, and if it'd been the Pharisee, if he'd been my grandfather, he'd have come out and he would have said, I told you not to come in the yard. I told you, this is what happens when you don't follow the rules. Demerits for you, but Papa Howell didn't say that. He just scooped me up and he carried me in the house. I was bleeding all over him. I was bleeding all over the house. He extracted that nail. It hurt so much, but he had me on his lap, and then he cleaned it up with alcohol, I guess, and bandaged it up. And then when he was done, there still was no lecture. But what I heard was this. Papa Howell hugged me, and I remember when I was a kid, I thought he had like some kind of like whoopee cushion under his skin or something, because when he would hug, there was this sound like, I'd run out in the yard, and it bled all over the place, and his word to me was, Mama Howell, in that sewing room where she had the Degas ballerina. She had a sewing machine. Those of you my age and older know what I'm talking about. Those of you younger, I'll try to explain it to you. There used to be sewing machines that you didn't plug in. They were mechanical, and the way they operated, I watched Mama Howell. She would get on there and she would pedal, and it would make the bobbin go up and down. She made her own clothes and drapes, everything. She was great. And she told us, like, kids, don't mess with my sewing machine. Okay, but one day, we were idiots. We got in there, and my sister, it's probably her idea, not mine, she decided we would have a contest to see who could make that bobbin go the fastest. So Jan starts, she's doing pretty good. I can do that. I'm on there, I'm going fast, and then she's back on it. It isn't going, just maniacal. Oh, sure, I've got that thing. It's just a blur going up and down. We're just crazy. And then we hear the voice behind us, children. We turned around in a panic, bracing for didn't I tell you not to get on my sewing machine? But instead, she said, children, we waited. She said, I've just pulled some peach cobbler out of the oven. Don't you want some? We said, yeah. We'd like some peach cobbler. I think I learned about the grace of God, and that it's not about merits and demerits or dividing a line or judging other people. I think I've learned that not at church, but from my grandparents, the way that they loved. There's healing power in that love. And it's really a relief. Like, we don't have to judge, we leave that to God. What a relief. We're no good at it anyway. What a burden to carry, how toxic it is to pass judgment in our heads. I had the dream, and on Monday I thought, should I tell my people about the dream? At first I didn't think I would, and then I thought I would, and I thought of a really good sermon about dancing with my grandmother. And it's not a bad sermon. I'll share it with you in a nutshell. In that sermon, what I was going to say is, Mama Howell's been gone 50 years. I've really missed her. I've missed her cobbler. I've missed being crowded at her table. I've missed her smile. Never did dance with her, to my knowledge. But because of the grace of God, the day will come when I will be with her, Papa Howell, all the others we've loved and lost will be together. There will be a dance of great joy. And if I preach that sermon, you'd like it, and you should, because that is God's promise to us, that it'll be that good. But I think there's more to it than that, because, friends, we live in a world that is so broken, and we need fresh dreams. We need a new kind of hope. I'm not a dancer. I would need to learn some dance steps to learn to dance with my grandmother. I think I need to learn some other moves from her. I think about her moves. She knew about the cobbler. She knew about the crowded table. Papa Howell knew about I want to learn their moves. I want to learn to get out of merits and demerits. To remember he who's been forgiven much knows how to love. We need to love. And it's so important right now in our world. I keep reminding you of what Lincoln said. At the moment, our country was its most bitterly divided ever, even more than today. Lincoln very simply spoke what I think is God's mission for us. Lincoln said, with malice toward none. You just have to dwell on that over and over. With malice toward none, let us bind up the nation's wounds. Our nation's really wounded. People are wounded. People are broken. People are hurting. They might look mad and severe, but they're so wounded deep inside. Ours in the church is to know that we have been forgiven much. Ours in the church is to understand where the dividing line falls. Ours in the church is to love and to be about binding up the wounds, loving. I'm grateful for that. Thanks be to God.